Hello, I'm Anna Kalczyńska. Welcome to this edition of Evening Talks. For 300 days of the war in Ukraine, Don Arleth was one on the ground, documenting the unfolding tragedy of a nation under siege. Starting from the refugee crisis at the border with Poland to the atrocities uncovered in Bucha and the mass graves in Izium, he has witnessed the human cost of the war in its starkest form. Don Arleth, TVP World's correspondent, is with us, is our guest tonight. Welcome, Don. Hello.
Thank you very much. Thousand days of war.
Yes, 1,000 years of war, 1,000 days of war, indeed. So together we'll delve into your journey and talk about your observations, your comments, your memories, everything that that marked you, basically, and left an indelible mark on your life. But let's begin with a very strong yet vivid memory from Bucha, if you may.
I'm standing here in Bucha, where there was where a mass grave of residents of the city is being exhumed at the moment. Right now, there are at least 14 bodies that they have taken out of the ground, and they're going to be taking those bodies to the morgue. There are family members of some of the missing people that are trying to identify their loved ones. I'm told that there are at least, or estimated to be, around 40 bodies in the ground. Right now, as I said, about 14 have been recovered, and they're undergoing the identification process. I've also been told that the people that were put in this mass grave were people that were from the city, and they were found shot dead on the streets during the Russian occupation.
So, Don, we saw you here visibly moved, with your voice trembling. Terrible scenes, right? What do you remember from that day?
Yeah, it's interesting. Actually, I recall this report as maybe one of my worst reports, but you see that I was trembling. I didn't take off my hood. I think me, the camera crew, we were all in shock in what we had seen and experienced that day. We had just returned from the airport in Hostomel, where the scenes of really brutal fighting, and really everything was very fresh and still littered the airport. This was my first experience of what a true war zone looks like. And when we got into Bucha and saw those scenes, honestly, I think none of us knew how to feel, and we were just trying to figure out exactly what was going on. There were a lot of reporters that didn't really understand what was going on. This mass grave that was dug behind the church there, the main church in Bucha, was done by the priest and the local residents who were gathering these dead bodies that were in some cases laying through the streets for weeks. And even dogs were starting to eat the dead bodies, so they decided it would be best to put them underground and then deal with the exhumation later. And of course, Bucha was liberated. Very intense fighting around Kyiv, and as we all know now, looking back, that's when the Russians finally pulled out from that area. But the scenes of destruction that they left behind completely changed me and my perspective. And this was the one incident that made me say, I want to cover this war. Because, living in Poland as a young man, learning Polish history and the atrocities that happened during World War II, I started to see parallels that this was happening all over again in the 21st century.
Exactly. So what was your reaction when you heard the Russians saying that those scenes were staged, that it was all fake?
Well, I went there and I saw it with firsthand knowledge, and saw it with my own two eyes, so I knew it wasn't fake. I talked to the residents who lived under the occupation, who have the stories. Some villages that also, put a mark on me, Alexandrivka, which is a little bit further west of Bucha, a small village, but completely leveled. We were going in there when there was still just tons of military supplies. The Russians left so quick, they left so many military supplies behind, and the Ukrainian armed forces were picking up this equipment. And I asked them, oh, what are you guys going to do with this? And they said, we're going to return it to its rightful owner.
All right, so you're a reporter, a war correspondent right now. So I'm not going to ask you why you wanted to go there, to go to Ukraine. You wanted to report and to witness the truth. But I wonder what motivated you to stay. After all, 300 days, it's a very long time.
Well, like I mentioned before, I think that one incident it definitely flipped something in my mind and said, this is important. The eyes of the world are focused on Ukraine right now, and this story needs to be told. Mm-hmm. And with that, there were opportunities for me to return and to do different type of work. I wasn't there for the first liberation of Kharkiv. I really wanted to be, but because of other circumstances, I wasn't. And it wasn't until the second counteroffensive, if you will, when they liberated the Kharkiv region, the entire region, that I got that opportunity, and that's where I spent a good couple months. I just didn't come home because of what we were uncovering over in that part of Ukraine. And again, with the more mass graves uncovered in the city of Izium, all these people, there was over 540 about, if I remember correct. And well, that was obviously going into Izium, seeing President Zelensky raise the flag over a freshly liberated Ukrainian city, being amongst the first journalists allowed to be in the city, and then talking with residents what they endured under Russian occupation. This was of vital interest for everybody in the world to see exactly how the Russians are operating and functioning. There are a lot of paradoxes with the Russian narrative that they're going to liberate people, yet they go in and they kill them and destroy their homes.
Exactly.
And so this obviously made me want to chase this trail more. And at the time, I'd also like to say that the momentum that the Ukrainian armed forces had in that part of the country, it started to look really good. I mean, a lot of people were very impressed from this first counteroffensive when the Russians left Kyiv and then left the city of Kharkiv. And this was the second part of that process. And really, at the end of this journey, if you will, it was about 2.5, 3 months till the end of the year. Everybody was, well, really hopeful that this war would actually end pretty soon.
So let's get back in time, because you started your coverage at the border when the crisis, refugee crisis occurred. So what were your most vivid memories or more touching stories that you witnessed?
Women and children and old people crossing the border in just huge numbers. A refugee, I had an interview with Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki before this all happened, and he said they were expecting somewhere around 1 million refugees, and that's what they were preparing for. But as we all know now, that number was much greater. To see, I've lived in Poland for most of my life, and to see Poles come together at that moment when Ukrainians needed them the most was by far the most impressive thing that I saw, and I think many people here in Poland. I mean, really, it was like one of the most patriotic things that you could see. Poles opening their homes, their wallets, and their hearts to the people of Ukraine to try and give them a hand. And of course, all the help that poured across the border, even from other countries in Europe, volunteers that showed up with either humanitarian aid or to help place these refugees in some kind of housing accommodations. This was really unbelievable, and I'll absolutely never forget it.
I can only imagine, you know, what you encounter after coming back and problems you might have after spending so much time in such terrific situations and witnessing all that you're talking about. But we understand this is a mission, right? It's not just a job. It's not a simple work that we do on an everyday basis. What is your hope of achieving in terms of raising awareness as a reporter and telling the stories and bearing the truth? to the viewers?
Well, we now have a permanent correspondent in Kyiv, Oz Chatterjee, here on TVP World. So I haven't been back in about a year. I think it's been a little bit more than a year now. I've seen a lot, I've experienced a lot, and I've felt during the whole time of doing this to try and show as much as possible on our small network, which is still small. But I felt that that was very important. I still believe it's very important. I have a show that I do every week, Ukraine This Week, here on TVP World, where I try and get to the bottom of the most important threads that we see in Ukraine. I absolutely believe that this war is absolutely vital to our security here in Central and Eastern Europe, here in Poland, the Baltics. If it's handled in the wrong way, then we can expect big trouble ahead. And of course, the people of Ukraine. In my life before being a journalist, I've dealt with many Ukrainians. I was in a private business, and I've seen that the Ukrainians coming over to Poland to work, for instance, they just want a fair shake. I mean, it's really as simple as that. And if we look at this war in Ukraine, the people want to stamp out corruption. Is there corruption in Ukraine? Yes, there is. But I've seen it, I've experienced it. I've seen some of the most profound acts of humanity, kindness, and honesty from Ukrainians who have little to nothing to benefit from living in wet trenches for months on end. And I think the moral reasons behind this war are absolutely true, and they're there. And Ukraine just wants a future, and they look to Poland, and they see Poland as an example, an ideal example of what they want to achieve.
Talking about those trenches that you mentioned, what is the morale today of the soldiers, and what was the situation on the front, on the battlefield that you witnessed?
Well, I'd say that probably in the last year, year and a half, definitely the last story that I covered was the Novokakhovka Dam, when the Russians blew that up. And was down in the city of Kherson. It was completely flooded. That was one of the last stories that I did. And since that time, this war has changed from one of trench artillery warfare, this war of attrition, to the Russians have caught up and learned a lot from the Ukrainian armed forces in terms of drone use. And the situation along the front lines is very, very much more complicated by that because actually one of the most dangerous things that you can do is approach the front lines, the zero lines, the line of contact. That's probably one of the more dangerous things you can do because these first-person view drones, which are basically targeting everybody and everything that is in the vicinity, and these things have a range of 15, 30 kilometers out. So that was not the case when I was there. We were actually able to approach the front lines and get in the trenches. And then it's more work with artillery and drones.
So you're saying that 2 years and a half, this war has changed, basically?
It has changed.
A completely different facet.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And what can you tell us about Ukrainian resilience and determination? Do you think that they still believe that they can win this war?
Well, I think we're at a crossroads to some extent. I think Ukrainians must be yearning for some kind of peace, but not peace at any cost. The terms have to be proper and correct. Where we're going to go from here, especially with President-elect Donald Trump coming in, that remains to be seen. There is lots of speculation on both ends, whether he will throw Ukraine under the bus and seek peace at any cost, or whether he will actually take a tougher stance than the Biden administration. I would say, honestly, in my opinion, we don't know until he starts to reveal what his plan is for Ukraine. But at the same time, people are tired of this war. Thousands, tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people have been killed. Ukraine has a serious personnel problem at the moment. If we look at the regions in the east, many of which are places that I have been, they're all under Russian control right now, or they're at threat of being taken over by Russians. So This is a very dire situation. Now, the Ukrainians hold this piece of land in the Kursk region. This could be a very valuable bargaining piece for them in potential peace talks. But I think Ukrainians themselves probably want a solution to this sooner than later, because it is taking a toll on their society and on their manpower. And of course, if we look at the civilians and all the civilian suffering that's going, we're looking at probably one of the worst winters in modern history that Ukraine will face this year. As most of the electricity is out, the capacity is very low, and well, it's going to be a cold winter.
Exactly, the winter is coming, and perhaps, who knows, a second wave of refugee crisis. Don Arleth, thank you very much. We really appreciate you being with us tonight, and thank you for everything you did and is doing still. And that completes this edition of World Talks. Thank you very much for watching, and please do stay with us as a special edition of World News Tonight approaches at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you for watching.